Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz pianist and composer Florian Hoefner on his Iris Trio project. His work as a composer has always played a big role in his releases. Now he's excited to introduce a new project for which the first time he has served as a pure composer with a classical ensemble. On April 5, 2024, the U.S. Canadian Chamber Ensemble Iris Trio, clarinet, viola, and piano, is going to release its second album entitled Project Earth Blue Chapter. It features his original compositions with original poetry written and recited by Griffin Prize-winning Canadian poet Don McKay. The work celebrates our natural world and illuminates the triple planetary crisis. It's a great story. Enjoy.
Well, thank you for reaching out with the new project. It's great to catch up with you again.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for featuring it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in this role, it's really kind of relegated to you being the composer of the piece, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm almost in the classical sense. I'm the composer and not the performer for this. Yeah.
Excellent. So before we get into this latest project, I want to know, how did you get through COVID? How did you, now that we're kind of fully out, projects are popping, things are happening, how did you end up getting through that time period, and how good does it feel to have this new material coming out?
Yeah, I got through COVID fairly well, thanks to my university job, which kept me afloat. I didn't have to worry about losing gigs during that time because I kept teaching at the university, and I used the time to do projects like this one, right? Like I had a lot of time at home, which I spent on writing, mainly this project. It took me a long time to get this done with two little kids. So, this, in a way, this is my big COVID project, this new classical project that's coming out. And of course, once we started playing again, it was so amazing. I think on my first concert back on stage, I almost cried when I said we're so happy to be back on stage, Yeah, that's been really, really nice to pick that up again. And things have picked up fairly well since COVID too. I've had a lot of tours with my trio, lots of traveling. So yeah, it's really nice to see things back in full swing almost.
So this role of being the composer for the Irish Trio, it almost seems as though you kind of have a yin and yang. You kind of have one world in the jazz and another in the classical. Does this project kind of satiate that kind of split of your head and how you approach music overall?
Yes, I would say it's a fairly new interest of mine, writing for classical ensembles. I did one piece before for clarinet and piano, also all written out. My wife, Christine Carter, she's the clarinetist in the Iris Trio, so I wrote a piece for her and myself to play a few years back. That was sort of my first foray into the classical world. And that was a lot of fun and very successful. So then Christine's Trio asked me to write for them, and I had never done anything like it before, but I was really excited about it because it gave me an opportunity to enter this other world where I can really control every single note, right? In writing for a classical ensemble, you got to think about every single note. There's no improvisation, no slash chords, which is on one side a big challenge, but on the other side it's a really big opportunity to be able to shape this whole piece of music with your ideas. And what I also really wanted to do, I'm not a classically trained composer at all. I wanted to see how I can bring my language as a jazz pianist into that classical world. And that experiment worked out quite well in the end, I think.
And the one thing I've noticed is that during this pandemic, there's so many silver linings. Do you think this project would have come about if it hadn't been for the time to slow down and go through this pandemic?
I think it would have, because the first seeds were already planted before the pandemic. The first there are three works on the recording that I wrote, and the first one, the Bird Island Suite, was actually premiered in 2019, before the pandemic, and that was all they had asked me to do at first, but because they really liked what I had done, they asked me to do two more pieces, and I think that would have happened with the pandemic or not. It would have probably taken a little bit longer had the pandemic not happened, because it would have been busier playing and being gone and traveling. So in a way, the pandemic sped this project up.
So talk to me a little bit about the ultimate coming together of the Irish Trio. How did all of this kind of begin? How did you artistically decide you were going to put this together? How did all of it kind of become what it is now?
Yeah, well, the Irish Trio has been around for many, many years. It sort of came out of the Manhattan School of Music. You know, my wife started it with Anna Petrova, the pianist, and another violist who was at the Manhattan School of Music at that time. She has, in the meantime, left the ensemble because she's with the Juilliard String Quartet now, and got really busy, so she had to leave the ensemble. But there's a wonderful new violist who plays in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, Zoe Martin-Doiki. So that's sort of the history of the ensemble. They've had a CD out in the mid-2010s with like classical repertoire, Mozart, Schumann, one contemporary work. But then they sort of shifted and wanted to play new music. They were sort of, they liked playing the old classics, but they wanted to do something more relevant, more contemporary. And so the idea was born to commission composers to write new music for them. And they were really interested in that connection between the jazz and the classical world. They really wanted to play music that was influenced by jazz and other genres. And so the idea was born of this Project Earth, a project which is meant to illuminate the wonderful nature and environment we have on the planet, and at the same time to also address the big crises that it's facing right now. So there's going to be multiple albums coming out. For the first one, they approached me and Don McKay, who's a poet who's also living out in St. John's in Newfoundland. And yeah, the whole thing, we met for lunch with Don and started brainstorming, and this whole idea about the Bird Islands came about, and then Don came out with this second poem about the biosphere and the interaction of all of the different organisms. And so yeah, the project gradually took shape over many meetings and discussions, and yeah, I'm just so happy with what came out of it in the end.
I think it's interesting too. A part of this is, living through this pandemic, the world slowed down, and there was a lot of things that kind of probably reawakened as far as nature was concerned. I know that the Venice Canal cleared up, and there was things, there was things in the natural world. Like, I know at one point I was driving a back road that I've driven many times before, and I saw a dog chasing a deer, and I've never seen anything like that. And it was strange because everything slowed down, and I think the animals were like, where are all these people at? We're always used to this noise pollution, but we got to be with each other. And I think that this project commemorating that celebration of this planet that got a chance to take a deep breath and maybe heal itself.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. I think there's a documentary, maybe it was even David Attenborough, about the animal world during the pandemic, like how all the animals appeared in places they haven't been for decades, right? Because they were always too busy and too full of humans, like turtles hatching on usually busy beaches in California, in Florida, and I remember South Africa, the penguins were coming to spots where they haven't been in many years. So yeah, it's a nice connection that way, that this project came about in the pandemic, where nature had this brief moment to take a breath and come back a little bit.
So talk to me a little bit about what you hope the listener gets from this project.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few aspects to that. First of all, I hope that the listener is really going to enjoy the music. I think it's very accessible, very exciting music at the same time, with a lot of compositional depth. There's really a lot in there to discover on the repeated runs and repeated listenings. There's a lot of dance pieces that made it in there. There's a reel, which is inspired by Newfoundland folk music. Lots of exciting rhythms and groove. That's something I really wanted to do with this project, because rhythm and groove is not something that happens that much in classical music. So I really wanted to make this chamber ensemble groove, and they really did. Like I can't praise these three musicians enough for how well they are playing these scores. Besides the musical enjoyment, I also hope that especially the English-speaking audiences are getting something out of Don's beautiful poems. He's really one of Canada's best poets, and he's a specialist in nature poetry. So what he wrote is really incredibly beautiful. So I think a lot of people are going to enjoy his poems. And then, of course, I also hope that it will direct a little bit of attention towards the beauty of nature and the value of protecting it from further decline and threats.
So it's going to come out on Friday, April 5th. If anyone wants to pick it up and, catch anything from your career or anything else that might be going on with shows, where's the best place to go?
My website is always a good starting place. It's my first name minus last name.com, Florian minus Hoefner.com. The album is called Iris Trio, Project Earth, The Blue Chapter. You'll find it on all major streaming services, as well as on Bandcamp, in record stores across North America, and you also can get it.
Excellent, Florian. It's so good to catch up with you again. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for taking time out, and best of luck. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having this on, Joe. I'm really looking forward to seeing it published.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players, minds, and composers in Canada, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Florian for reaching back out to Neon Jazz. If you want to hear more Neon Jazz interviews, you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us at YouTube, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends. Hey Jazz fans, Joe Domino here, the host of the weekly Neon Jazz radio show and regular interview series being produced and distributed from Lee Summit, Missouri. We are quite excited to let you know about the first annual Lee Summit Jazz Fest taking place this summer on June 22nd, 2024 at the Bridge Space located at 210 Southwest Market Street. There will be 8 robust acts, including the Back Alley Brass Band and the great Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. There will also be art vendors and food trucks to make this a must-attend event. All details can be found at www.bridgespace.us/jazz. We will see you there.
Neon Jazz.